Hello, everyone. I want to continue on in my discussions of the movies that I bought in the recent Kino-Lorber March Madness sale. And today I want to talk about a 1979 film called Cuba. That's Sean Connery and Brooke Adams as the stars. It's directed by Richard Lester. It comes from 1979. It's a movie about the Cuban Revolution that occurred 20 years before. Sean Connery plays a former British officer who is now a anti-terrorist specialist. He comes to aid the Batista regime in their battle against Fidel Castro and his revolution. When he comes to Cuba, he quickly realizes he's probably too late, that the revolution will win, and he's also disgusted by the, the corruption and the brutality of the Batista regime. And along the way, he comes across Brooke Adams, who has been a former lover. He hasn't seen her in about 5 years. She spurns him, but then she gets sentimental and they can reconnect. She is the daughter-in-law of a rich Cuban business owner. Her husband is a philanderer, a playboy, a drunk, and he's played by Chris Sarandon, who's probably the best-looking actor in the movie, and maybe the best-looking actor in the movies in 1979. And she seems very young. She runs the cigar factory of the various businesses, that because the son who's supposed to be running it is simply not capable of doing it. So she's a strong woman, but the disparity in ages between Connery, he's 49 when they made this film, and Brooke Adams was 25, and it just doesn't mesh. And the husband's mistress of the moment works in the cigar factory. She's played by Lynette McKee. She's very good in this role. The movie does not pass the Bechdel test. I don't know if you know the Bechdel test, but it's where a movie has to have at least two female characters. They have to have a conversation with each other, and they have to talk about something other than a man. And the mistress and the wife do meet in this film, but they, of course, they talk about Chris Sarandon, the husband and the lover. So it doesn't pass the Bechdel test, but this is a macho world of warfare and combat, and it has a bunch of other really good character actors, and most of them are there for kind of comic relief. Denholm Elliott, Jack Weston, Martin Balsam. Hector Elizondo has a really good role. He plays the liaison between the Batista regime and Sean Connery. Sort of guides him, shows him what the topography of the situation is. But he himself is disillusioned by now. He knows that this Batista army is not going to fight. And the beginning of the film, the first 20, 30 minutes is really superb. It's kind of where you meet, because there's so many characters and so many different storylines going on. But the director, Richard Lester, really, there's little anecdotes. You get to know everybody within these 20 minutes, cross-cutting between the different characters. The battle scene, the bromance is often cited as it's the movie's downfall, but also the romance between Sean Connery and Brooke Adams. But also the battle scene at the end sort of gets out of control. It's hard to understand exactly what's going on. At one point, Sean Connery appears to change sides, and he and Jack Weston commandeer a tank of the regime. He tells Jack Weston, do you know how to drive a car? He says, yeah, and then you know how to drive a tank. Of course, it doesn't work out that way at all. But there's so many terrific scenes along the way. I mean, Lester just fills this movie with color. The location they filmed in Andalusia, Spain, standing in for Havana. Obviously, they couldn't film in Havana in 1979. But even though the movie is very sympathetic to the revolution, and that's and it seems odd today, but in 1958, 59, most Americans were sympathetic to the Cuban Revolution because Batista was so brutal. Everybody knew how brutal and the disparity in wealth in the country, and he was basically ruling it as his own private fiefdom. And of course, he was also closely associated with the American Mafia, which is in Godfather 2. And Fidel Castro actually appeared with Ed Sullivan, Jack Parr, mainstream American entertainment. Of course, 2 or 3 years later, he allowed the Soviet Union to put missiles in Cuba, and we almost went to a nuclear war. But in '59, people were sympathetic. And you know, when you look in the context of the film, that the regime is so awful that anything would have to be better than Batista. But and even the romance itself, even though it doesn't work, there's still some terrific scenes. For instance, they have a night of love, and then they take a walk at dawn. And where do they walk? They walk through the slums of Havana, and it's weird, but it's also effective. You really get the feel of the different income disparities and the poverty and the suffering versus, you know, the wealth and power of all these men who have sort of looted the country for their own benefit. And the other thing that's odd about this film in a little bit is Richard Lester. I would have thought that this was a project that Lester maybe was a job for hire kind of thing, but he initiated this project. He wanted to do a Casablanca set in the Cuban Revolution, and it doesn't work. I mean, you can see the bones of that story in Cuba, but it really doesn't work that well. But nevertheless, he fills this movie with all kinds of really almost surreal touches, and it moves fast. It's actually a very exciting movie, entertaining movie. If you forgive some of its narrative deficiencies, I mean, another scene I really liked is when Batista is hardly in this movie, but at one point, Sean Connery does go to meet him, and when he goes to Batista's mansion, an older woman sitting all by herself in a chair, you take to be maybe Batista's mother. She's sitting there watching American TV, and in particular a Mr. Clean commercial. And then they go upstairs and meet Batista, and he looks all zonked out. He's sitting in a chair silently, and an aide is showing him on film, is showing Dracula. And then when Batista leaves, you know, there's this long lineup to the last plane out of Havana, and all by itself comes this giant white grand piano. So I think there's a lot to recommend in this movie, and Lester was a very creative director. If you have the Criterion Channel, there's a film called Running, Jumping, Standing Still, I think it's called. It's about a 10 or 12 minute short. It's part of the Criterion Channel's Peter Sellers curated section, because it stars Sellers and Spike Milligan, and it was seen by John Lennon, and it's thought to be why Richard Lester got the job to direct the Beatles, the height of their fame in The Hard Day's Night In and Help. And Lester is often credited for being the director who kind of invented the music video and the way he shot some of the performances and the songs of the Beatles in those two movies. And he, of course, probably more famous for Superman 2 and 3, which come later, and he also had big successes with the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers. He had an anarchic style, frenetic style, a satirical side to him, which I think comes out in this movie. At any rate, it's a colorful movie, and one that I think is sadly overlooked. And it is Cuba, 1979, and that will do it for today, and I will catch you guys next time.